Let's say you're a Soviet design bureau working on the T-72 in the 1980s, trying to sell variants to not just the failing Soviet Union, but the rest of the non-NATO world as well. Your vehicles already have a reputation for being as cheap as humanly possible, knuckle-dragging cavemen from a technological standpoint, and uncomfortable for people to use. At least that money went into making the armour and firepower of your tank something rather special, right? Then some foreign dictator using even cheaper versions of your tanks gets his entire army blown up in about a month. Now your tanks look like shit, and nobody's buying. Do you A. learn from the issues that resulted in your tank's poor performance to design something new and better? B. ignore the issues and hope the problem goes away? C. put funding into conflicts your tanks can win to recoup their lost reputation on the international market? Or D. just rename whatever variant you were working on and pretend it's something completely new? Well, if you said A, you're an idiot, because this video is about the T90. So clearly the correct answer is D. But only because option B didn't work out so well last time. That's how we end up with the T90 Vladimir. Wait, Vladimir? Really? I'm not sure whether that's comically narcissistic or just a tongue-in-cheek reference to a long-running national joke. I mean, you don't see America naming their new main battle tank the John Smith now, do you? Speaking of national jokes, stop me if you've heard this one before. The T-72 was actually a great tank that perfectly combines quality and quantity, and the Gulf War just stacked all the odds unfairly against it and shouldn't be counted towards its reputation, something export models. Okay, and the T-90 is basically just a rebranded T-72BU, right? What? No? You can't say that. The T-90 is a great new tank that just happens to have the same armor profile, fire control system, autoloader, engine, transmission, ammunition, and physical dimensions as the tank it's most definitely not based on. How dare you insult Russia like that, you American biased capitalist pig? But the T-72 is still good too. Oh yeah, apparently I'm American now, so I guess that your favourite tank sucks episode on the M1 Abrams isn't coming out anytime soon after all. But back to the T-90. As the latest in a long line of turret-launching doorstops, the T-90 has all the suspension dampening and ride comfort of a freight train, sets its crew members on top of a pie-shaped bomb, and doesn't even have air conditioning because, well, I'm not sure really. I guess when the original T-90 variants produced in the early to mid-90s didn't even have a thermal sight, and the most prolific variants produced today still don't have a commander thermal, Challenger 2 says welcome to the club, we shouldn't exactly be expecting a technological marvel. It also still keeps the old autoloader famous for eating crew members' arms, which is a downgrade from the one present on the T-80U, and of course still can't unload or switch rounds already in the breech. I guess that explains why such a small tank devotes so much space to storing ammunition. Of course, anything that doesn't fit in the autoloader will just stack on the fuel instead. Naturally, nobody saw a problem with this. Then there's the small matter of the T-90's bad case of pink eye that comes from the active protection system, which doesn't work if the tank's hatches are open, something that will be rather common for a tank with no air conditioning in the Middle East. When it does work, the T-90 just has to stare really hard at incoming ATGMs, and just maybe they'll be laughed off course. Unless there are any modern missiles which aren't vulnerable to the system. Oh well, it's not as if the addition of the system removed a huge portion of what made the frontal armor profile good in the first place, right? Oh god, who designed this? Well, at least the tank is relatively light and should be decently fast, right?
Right.
Wrong!
It lacks about 400 horsepower compared to the T-80 series and more than 600 compared with the Leopard 2 or Abrams, which were both produced in the 70s. And don't even try reversing in the damn thing. Its transmission would make British tanks from the Second World War jealous. I guess that happens when the tank is powered by vodka and dreams. Dreams of the good old days, where the Soviet Union had the chance to build a great tank, and then didn't. More than a decade later on the T-90A, we'd at least see the improvement of a welded turret, took you long enough, and a thermal sight for the gunner. In a time where even M1A1s and Type 99s had commander thermals, along with basically every other comparator that isn't the Challenger 2. We'll get to that tank by the way. Oh boy we will. The APS boxes still take away from the ERA for some reason, despite not being a requirement on other tanks with the system, but at least some of the export T-90S models just gave up and threw them out, considering they're about as effective against modern missiles as a fly swatter. That's right, all the main ATGMs and air-to-ground missiles used in a modern battlefield, TOW-2s, Hellfires, Javelins, Spikes, they don't give two shits about this system anyway, so the removal of it for better ERA coverage just makes the export variants better tanks. Aye, when the nations you're exporting your tanks to are ending up with improved variants over your own national standard, I think it's time to call it quits.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
I guess this is why even the lead designer of the project stated that the tank was a mistake to build. You'd think that would have sounded like a bad sign, but I guess the Soviet Union do love their red flags. The worst thing is that the functionality of the Stora 1 APS isn't even a unique feature. Abrams have had much the same thing available to them since before the T90 was born, and they don't sacrifice any armour to get it. The tank still relies on ERA to make up for the pitfalls of the 20-year-old composite armour array, so its survivability diminishes heavily after the first hit. Tank engagements are almost always decided by the first hit anyway, so this would be okay, except for the small factor of the modern NATO ammunition designed specifically to punch through the ERA like it weren't even there. With that in mind, let's have a look at the frontal weak spots of the T90. Ah, fuck. Let's just hope old Vladimir hasn't been at the vodka all night and can actually get that first shot off. Although if my job was to crew this thing wearing a year-old potato for a hat, I'd probably drink myself half to death as well. Although I would use a good single malt scotch, just saying. There's no need to punish yourself even more, if you know what I mean. You already have to wake up in the morning and say, ah shit, I'm a T90 crewman. So we come to the most modern T90M variant, whose main redeeming feature is that it's the most aesthetically pleasing tank in service, and you Leopard fans can go suck it. Finally, Russia have removed the infrared dazzlers, protected the ammunition carousel, and added blowout panels, only took you half a century longer than America, added a commander thermal sight and remote weapon station, and increased the mobility to match tanks decade older than it, along with finally adding digital displays more than 25 years after the US. Seriously, not only was the commander blind, he was dumb too. Now, the only problems with the tank are that its autoloader is too small to fit the longer rounds that actually compete with Western equivalents, meaning those rounds have only been produced for the T90's eventual successor, the T14, which still can't be mass produced. And you wonder why the Russian military are running short on funds. Drop the T90, put that cash into the T14, and maybe you'd have a competitive tank for the first time since 1965. Don't at me. No wait, don't gulag me. Comrade. Hi troops, Koala here. The only reason I'm wearing the Kangol hat is because I really need a haircut. I hope you enjoyed that video. This is episode 2 of the Your Favourite Tank Sucks series, so go check out episode 1 on the Leopard 2, and of course we will be covering all the tanks you can think of in future episodes in this playlist. Obviously these are joke videos, please don't think that I'm legitimately hating on particular tanks. This is just a fun way to over-exaggerate some of the legitimate issues and limitations that do befall certain MBTs, cherry-picking variants for a laugh, and also a bit of a dig on certain YouTube videos that do the exact opposite and only talk about the positives of tanks and sweep the issues under the rug. So like the bottom line is, fuck. So I hope you got a laugh out of this video, don't take it too seriously, let me know what tank I should rip into next, and until then, stay safe and I'll catch you on the battlefield. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters for making this video possible, with a special thanks to Mo, Ian Anderson, Universe, Dane Winger, Tsukoshi Tiger, Captain Fubar, Dragon of the West, and Daggers68. If you like this video, I hope you subscribe and check out our other content, and if you really like what we do here, then consider supporting the channel on Patreon. And thanks for watching. I find it very interesting that War Thunder does things this way, as compared to its main rival World of Tanks, where the equivalent costs are much more standardised, the economy is much more friendly here. A player who is just slightly above average in any vehicle will always be at a net positive in that vehicle, regardless of its repair cost.